physically taxing tracks, dancing on the ceiling. This type of song requires the performer to move, climb, and expend energy without limiting it. He didn't ascend. Instead, in the middle of the song, he sat down on a step at the edge of the stage and continued to sing. He was direct and unpretentious in his delivery of the truth to the audience. He was experiencing vertigo. He claimed to have performed that specific song while seated for the first time in his entire career. Additionally, Lionel Richie turned the situation into a joke rather than a crisis, because he has spent the last 60 years transforming discomfort into charm. He said, "When you're feeling dizzy, sit your ass down." And the audience laughed because it sounded just like something he would say. He didn't get back up. Rather, he played 3 times a lady, one of the softest ballads in his whole repertoire, on a grand piano that was placed close by. The kind of song that doesn't even need him to move. After 50 years of performing, his hands could likely play this kind of song while he slept. He performed one of his signature songs in front of 10,000 people while seated. The joke from a few minutes ago was still hanging in the air, half amusing, half unnerving. Some in the crowd later said they assumed it was simply a quieter, more intimate moment built into the set list on purpose, a planned change of pace before the show picked back up. Nobody yet understood that they were watching the final song of the night. When the song ended, he did not introduce the next number. He announced something else instead, an intermission, unplanned, unscheduled, and, as it turned out, permanent. He stood, made his way toward the back of the stage, and walked off through a music giant illuminated screen, spelling out his own name in massive letters. Lionel. It was supposed to be a triumphant visual built for a moment of celebration, the kind of exit a performer makes when the night has gone exactly as planned. Instead, it became the last image of him that anyone in that building would see that night. Have you ever watched someone make a joke specifically so that the people around them would not have to worry? That is what those few minutes felt like to almost everyone in that arena. A 77-year-old man, music, 55 minutes into the first night of a brand new tour, choosing humor over alarm, choosing the piano over the encore, choosing to walk off stage through his own name rather than collapse in front of 10,000 strangers. It was in its own strange way one of the most controlled moments of his entire career, and it raised an uncomfortable question that nobody in that building wanted to ask out loud. Was this really the first time something like this had happened to him on this tour? Or had the warning signs simply been easier to ignore before tonight? To be fair to the facts, last night was not the first time the road has pushed back against Lionel Richie's schedule. Touring at this scale has never been gentle, even to performers half his age. It was, however, the first time the road pushed back against his body in front of an audience with no way to hide it. During the previous run of the Sing-a-Song All-Night-Long tour, the one that carried Richie and Earth, Wind and Fire across the United States and Canada in 2023 and 2024, a show at Madison Square Garden in New York had to be postponed entirely. The cause that time had nothing to do with dizziness or illness. Severe weather conditions made it impossible for Richie to reach the venue in time, grounding travel plans and forcing organizers to reschedule a date in one of the most demanding cities on any touring artist's calendar. Tickets had to be honored on a new night. Fans who had planned trips around that original date had to rearrange their own lives around someone else's flight delay. It was a logistics problem, not a medical one. And it is important to say so plainly, rather than let one incident bleed into the meaning of another. But logistics problems tell their own quiet story. A man in his late 20s can absorb a canceled flight and a missed connection without much consequence. A man in his 70s crisscrossing time zones, arenas, and climates on a schedule built for performers half his age experiences the same disruption very differently. The weather did not make Lionel Richie dizzy on a stage in Minnesota, but it did expose years earlier just how little margin exists in a touring schedule built around a 77-year-old body that still insists on doing what it has always done. And that body, to its enormous credit, has kept insisting. The Say Hello to the Hits tour, which ran through 2025, was not the victory lap of a man slowing down. It was, by every commercial measure, a triumph. 25 dates across Europe and a run in Las Vegas brought in roughly $8 million in revenue with more than 118,000 tickets sold. Billboard ranked it among the 10 highest-grossing tours of the year in the R&B category, putting Richie in the same conversation as artists decades younger, filling arenas that do not extend courtesy bookings to performers who can no longer sell seats. That is the contradiction sitting underneath last night's headline. This was not a fading star whose body had quietly been signaling decline for years, while audiences politely ignored it. This was a man who just months earlier had proven beyond any argument that he could still command a stage, still sell out a continent's worth of arenas, still deliver the kind of show that earns 9-figure revenue numbers in an industry that does not sentimentalize ticket sales. Promoters do not keep booking 70-something performers into rooms that size out of nostalgia. They book them because the math still, music works, because the seats still sell, because the demand has not slowed down, even if eventually the body underneath the legend has to. Lionel Richie was not winding down. He was by every available metric still very much in motion, which is exactly why the Grand Casino Arena moment landed the way it did. It did not fit the narrative anyone had been quietly preparing for. There was no slow public decline to point to, no string of canceled shows, no pattern of health concerns whispered about backstage for years before finally breaking into headlines. There was a tour that had just sold out across an entire continent, a man who had just published a memoir about the full sweep of his own life. And then 55 minutes into night, one of something new, a single moment that nobody saw coming. So if last night was not the predictable final chapter of a long visible decline, what was it instead? A body simply asking for rest after 60 years of almost never getting any. Or something that genuinely needed more attention than anyone backstage was prepared to give it that night. The people closest to the stage, the people who watched him sit down and joke his way through it, have their own answer already forming. And by morning, so did almost everyone else who heard about it. By the time most of the country woke up on Thursday morning, music footage of Lionel Richie sitting down mid-song was already everywhere. A journalist named Patrick Kessler had filmed the moment from the crowd and posted it within minutes, writing simply that the show had been canceled mid-show, describing exactly what fans had just watched in real time, second by second before most news outlets had even confirmed what happened. Music critic John Bream captured his own angle from a different part of the arena, showing Richie performing Dancing on the Ceiling while seated, dizzy and clearly uncomfortable, but still singing every word. Within hours, the clips had been reposted, quoted, and embedded into headline after headline, the way only a beloved figure's vulnerable moment can travel. Picked up first by entertainment outlets and then by general news desks that rarely cover concert footage at all. The closest thing to an explanation came not from a publicist, but from someone who had been standing a few feet away from Richie all night. John Paris, the drummer for Earth, Wind and Fire, told a Minnesota newspaper afterward that there had been no warning signs before the show, no hint backstage music that anything was wrong. His best guess, offered casually and without medical authority, was that Richie was a little dehydrated. It is worth saying plainly that this was one bandmate's impression in the moment. Not a diagnosis, not a statement from a doctor, and not anything Richie's own team has confirmed. But in the absence of any official word, it became the closest thing fans had to an answer. And it spread just as quickly as the footage itself. That silence from Richie's own camp is in its own way part of the story. No statement on his social media, no update on his condition, no confirmation, denial, or clarification of what a bandmate had suggested informally to a reporter. For an artist whose entire identity has been built on warmth and accessibility, On chatting with audiences and posting here, we come messages the night before a show. The quiet afterward felt unusually loud. Fans filled that silence the way fans always do, with worry dressed up as commentary. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own memories of seeing him live decades earlier, wishing him a fast recovery and quietly admitting they were more scared than the headlines led on. Some pointed out that he had just turned 77 days earlier and that maybe the schedule itself, 26 dates across an entire summer, was simply too much to ask of anybody at that age, however legendary.